Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. It's Tuesday, time to talk about some new releases coming out this Friday, January 17th. A little over 300 albums coming out this week. I got 12 on my list for today. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. Like I said in the intro, a little over 300 albums coming out this week. I'm only going to talk about 12 of them on the show, though, so if there's something I don't talk about, make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you're looking forward to grabbing this week. Like always, though, if you're unable to find these in your local brick-and-mortar stores, they should all be available online. I'll put links down below in the comments section for them. You can also always go over to the Vinyl Den store on Amazon. All the pre-orders are on there, new releases, all sorts of cool stuff to check out. So it might not be high on everyone's list, but I'm really excited for the new Mac Miller album that's coming out this week. This is Balloonerism. It's his 7th studio album. It's his second posthumous album, though. It's going to run you about $40. It's a 2LP release. There's a standard black version. There's the emerald green version that's the Amazon exclusive. And then there's a white version that's going to be the indie exclusive. So all the tracks on this were recorded in 2013 and 2014. So it was right around the same time he released the Faces mixtape, which I think it's kind of widely seen as one of his best releases. It hit like number 3, I think, on the Billboard 200. My big question is, with these like unreleased tracks or posthumous albums, I think they kind of go one of two ways. They're either really good stuff, but I think a lot of the times it's when you listen to them, you're like, okay, I understand why this was never released, even though, some of it's good. I don't think it's quite ever lives up to the expectations that a lot of people put on it. So I'll definitely stream that and check that one out this week. Then you also got the Best Warrant coming out. This was released back in 1996. This is a music on vinyl release, so it's going to be a little bit more 2LP release. It's on red vinyl. It's limited 2,000 copies. It's going to run you about $50 online. So this is the first time it's ever been available on vinyl. So what you're getting on this album is the best tracks off the band's first 3 albums. So you got songs off of Dirty, Rotten, Filthy, Stinking Rich. You got songs off of Cherry Pie and Dog Eat Dog. But what I really like to see from Warrant is for them to release their full discography on vinyl. Because I want to say like the last 4 of their 5 albums have never been available on vinyl. Some of the other ones are pretty hard to find. So I'd like to see them do the entire series, but this is a good compilation. You got there's a cover of We'll Rock You on here. There's an acoustic version of I Saw Red, which I actually prefer the acoustic version over the studio version. So that's on there also. I feel like this is one of those compilations where you're going to get most of the band's best tracks. But if you're unfamiliar with anything that came out after Dog Eat Dog, I highly recommend going back and checking that out, because as the 90s went on and as music changed, Warrant kind of changed with it. They weren't, yes, they still had that like hairband kind of element that they had in the late 80s and early 90s, but they also evolved also. Their music evolved with it, and there's some really good stuff that I think is as good as a lot of the stuff they did earlier in their career also. Another music on vinyl release that's coming out this week is the self-titled debut album from Fastway. This came out back in 1983. It's going to run you about $39. It's going to be on white vinyl. It's going to be pretty limited, though. There's only 750 copies that were pressed, which, even for a band that's not hugely popular like Fastway, I feel like that's not a lot. I feel like it should be, like the minimum should be like 1,500 to 2,000 copies. This album wasn't available for a long time. The first time it was ever reissued was in 2023 by Music on Vinyl. I want to say that was like 1,000 copies, and even that was kind of hard to find. I think most people probably know Fastway from the Trick or Treat soundtrack, but I think this is their best-selling album. I know for sure it's their highest charting album. It hit, I think, number 31 here in the U.S. on the Billboard 200. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's definitely a good one to go back through. Say What You Will was the big single off that album. Then you've also got Hooked by Great White getting reissued this week. Came out back in 1991. It was their 5th studio album. It's going to run you about $27. There's a black version of this. There's a blue version. It's going to be the indie exclusive. This is another album that wasn't available for a really long time. This is the first time it's ever been reissued. This was the follow-up to their hugely successful 4th album, Twice Shy, which I think a lot of times it's hard to follow up an album like that. This album is a little different than what they did before, though. It's not as heavy. It's maybe a little bit more, maybe radio-friendly might be the better way to put it. But there's still some really good tracks on here. I guess the funny thing about this album is it commercially did pretty well. It hit number 18 on the Billboard 200, but there was no big tracks off of there. They didn't have any big singles. I think it was the strength of what they'd done earlier in their career that really kind of helped push this album up. There's also a reissue of Hellbilly Deluxe 2 by Rob Zombie coming out this week. Come out back in 2010. It was his fourth studio album. It's actually part 2 to his debut album from 1998. It's going to run you about $39 online. So for his first 3 albums, what Rob did was he would either record a lot of the stuff himself or he would bring in session musicians on those albums. This is the first album where he brought in his full touring band, and I think the chemistry that they had really kind of lent itself to, I guess, better cohesiveness, I think, on this album. It's less experimental than the album that came out before, which was Educated Horses. It's more like a return to like this, I guess, straightforward kind of metal sound that Rob is known for. Of course, it has those same typical horror themes that you would expect from a Rob Zombie album. And then you've got the reissue of Melissa by Mercyful Fate coming out this week. Came out back in 1983. It was their debut album. It's going to be on black and yellow splatter vinyl. It's going to run you about $33 online. This ended up being a pretty influential album. It influenced not only metal, but also thrash in the 80s. Of course, fronted by the legendary King Diamond. I think this is the second album from Mercyful Fate I ever listened to. I think it was Into the Darkness or In the Darkness. I think it came out like 1993. That was the first album I ever listened to from them. I wasn't a big fan of it. I mean, it's generally not my style of music anyway, but Melissa had a couple of tracks that I will occasionally go back and revisit. So it's, if you're unfamiliar with that genre of music or really unfamiliar with Mercyful Fate, I think it's at least a good one to start with. There are some great jazz releases coming out this week also. The first one was Art Blakey, Like Someone in Love. This came out back in 1967. It's actually recorded in 1960, though. Part of the Blue Note Classic series, which they always do a great job with these albums. They're always mastered by Kevin Gray from the original analog tapes. Pressed to Optimal. It's going to run you about $28 online. So this was all recorded during the same recording sessions in 1960 that Night in Tunisia came from, which I think is kind of widely seen as not only one of Art Blakey's best albums, but one of the better jazz albums of the 60s. It's got all the same cast on here. He's got Lee Morgan, Wayne Shorter, Bobby Timmons. It's a great lineup. The title track off this is an absolute classic from Art. Then you also got Freddie Hubbard, Here to Stay. So this came out back in 1976. This is another one that was recorded long before. It was recorded in 1962. It's also going to run you $28. It's also a Blue Note Classic series release. Mastered by Kevin Gray, pressed it at Optimal. So when this album came out in 1976, it was actually packaged together with another album, Hubcap, and sold that way. So this album was never received a standalone solo release until 1985. And I mean, he's got like an all-star lineup on this album because he's joined by Wayne Shorter, Cedar Walton, Reggie Workman, Philly Joe Jones on drums. The first time I listened to this album, I it's got a couple really good tracks on here, but it's nowhere close to being some of Freddie's best work. I think that's why there was such a big delay from the time it was recorded until the time it was released. There's also a couple of Hank Mobley albums coming out this week. First one is Soul Station, released back in 1960. It's going to run you about $24. It's going to be on yellow vinyl. So this is being released through Hermitage, which they're an Italian label. I don't think I've ever heard any of their releases. They got a lot of good reviews online, though. I mean, this is one of my favorite jazz albums of all time. But Blue Note released this as part of their classic series. I think it was 2021. I've got that pressing. Sounds absolutely fantastic. So I don't think I need to grab another copy. But he's got Wynton Kelly on here, Paul Chambers, Art Blakey. Like I said, if you're a jazz fan or you're a casual jazz fan, if you're unfamiliar with this album, check it out because it's one of the best of all time. And then you got Workout coming out, which was released in 1962. Same thing, it's being released by Hermitage. It's going to run you about $27, so it's a couple dollars more. It's going to be on yellow vinyl. This is one that I'm not really familiar with. I think there's only one track off this album that I'm familiar with, but All Music had this listed as one of their 17 essential hard bop albums of all time. Same things. He always works with great musicians, though. Grant Green's on here, Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, Philly Joe Jones. So many great musicians. But, I mean, I don't think you can ever go wrong with any of Hank's albums. There's also Excitable Boy by Warrant and Zevon getting reissued this week. This came out back in 78. It was his third studio album. It's going to run you about $38 online. It's going to be on red vinyl. This is a Friday Music release. And Friday Music always does a really good job with their albums. They have this listed as limited edition, but it doesn't say what it's really limited to. Of course, this was Warren's big album. This has Werewolves of London on there. Excitable Boy is another great track from Warrant. To be honest, I think this is one of only 2 albums of Warrant's I've ever listened to beginning to end. I don't have a copy of it, so maybe I will grab a copy of it this week. And then the last album I got on my list is Under Soil and Dirt by The Story So Far. This came out back in 2011. It was their debut studio album. It's going to run you about $24 online. So there's 2 different versions of this are getting reissued. There's a colored version that's going to run you about $24. I think it's on like orange vinyl. And then there's a picture disc version. It's going to run you a little more. It's like $35. If I ever had my choice, I'm always going to pick the standard version over a picture disc version, even if there is a big price difference. But this is not one of my favorite albums from The Story So Far. It is a good 2010s pop punk album. There are some really catchy tracks on there, but it's one that I guess if you're unfamiliar with the band, it's a good one to start with. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you're looking forward to grabbing this week. I know for sure I'm going to get that Warrant album. I've got that one on pre-order. I might grab that Mac Miller. Might grab that Fastway. Might grab a couple of those jazz releases also. But let me know what you guys are looking forward to. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.